Hello everyone, today I will continue telling you the story of the single mother Tiểu San. I hope you enjoy the video. After being discharged from the hospital, Tiểu San brought Hoai back to a small house on the outskirts of town, a quiet place with enough sunlight, enough breeze, and, most importantly, enough stillness for him to recover. Hoai's leg was still weak after the injury. Every step was a trial, not only for his body but also for his will. The doctors had given very careful instructions. He had to practice walking every day, regularly and patiently, without rushing. Tiểu San remembered every word as if it were her only guiding principle. Their mornings began slowly. Tiểu San woke up early and opened the door to let the sunlight flood the room. She prepared a cup of warm water and a light breakfast before returning to the bed to wake Hoai. He was often already awake, lying still and staring at the ceiling, his eyes still carrying traces of fatigue. Every time he saw her step in, that gaze softened. "Time to get up," she said gently, her voice soft as if afraid of hurting him. Hoai nodded, the corner of his lips lifting slightly. Even the smallest movement was enough to draw beads of sweat onto his forehead. Tiểu San helped him sit up, slowly, carefully, attentive to every breath. She placed the crutches neatly beside the bed, checked the strap around his ankle once more, and only then helped him stand. The moment his foot touched the floor, Hoai frowned slightly. A dull pain shot up toward his knee, familiar yet still uncomfortable. He tightened his grip on the crutch, but his other hand was immediately taken by Tiểu San. "I'm here," she said. "We'll go slowly." They began with short steps inside the room. 1, 2, then a pause. Hoai breathed heavily, his back tense as he struggled to keep his balance. Tiểu San did not rush him. She stood close, one hand supporting his back, the other holding his hand firmly, anchoring all the trembling. At times he faltered, his breathing uneven, a flicker of discouragement passing through his eyes. "Want to rest for a bit?" she suggested. Hoai shook his head. "One more step." She smiled, not a bright smile, but one filled with trust. And he stepped forward. A small step, yet an entire journey. In the days that followed, the training route gradually grew longer, from the bedroom to the living room, then out to the porch. Tiểu San was always by his side, remembering every milestone of his progress. She counted his steps, but very softly, as if afraid the numbers might pressure him. When he was tired, she sat down at eye level with him so he wouldn't have to look up at someone stronger than himself. At noon, while he slept, Tiểu San took the time to do the laundry, cook, and then sit by his bed reading to him, short passages, her voice steady and calm, making it easier for him to drift into sleep. Some days he woke up halfway and found her still there, head lowered, turning the pages very gently. He said nothing, only looked at her for a long time, as if trying to etch that image into his memory. In the afternoons, they practiced again. Sometimes the pain was worse because his body was tired. Once, Hoai angrily threw the crutch onto the chair, the dry clatter echoing in the room. He turned his face away, not wanting her to see his helplessness. Tiểu San did not scold him. She picked up the crutch, placed it back where it belonged, and sat down beside him. "It's okay to be angry," she said softly. "If you're tired, say you're tired. Just don't give up." Hoai was silent for a long time. Then he nodded faintly. Tiểu San held out her hand, waiting. 1 beat. 2 beats. Finally, he took her hand. Evenings were the most peaceful time. After dinner, Tiểu San massaged Hoai's leg according to the doctor's instructions, slow, even movements, her hands warm. Hoai closed his eyes, letting the pain gradually melt into a gentler sensation. Sometimes he opened his eyes and caught her focused gaze, so serious, yet so tender. In that moment, he understood that his perseverance was no longer just his own matter. Time passed in small footsteps. Some days Hoai walked farther than the day before, other days he could only stand for a few minutes. Tiểu San did not measure success by distance, but by the fact that he still stood up every day. Each night, she noted down what he managed to do, not to compare, but to remind herself that they were moving forward. One morning, Hai managed to walk all the way to the gate. The early sunlight poured into the yard, golden and warm. He stood there, breathing hard, but his eyes lit up. Tieu San stood beside him, saying nothing, only squeezing his hand lightly. In that moment, no promises or distant plans were needed. It was enough to know that, no matter how long the road to recovery might be, he would not walk it alone. And Tieu San, as she had been from the very beginning, stayed right by his side, quietly, steadily, never leaving. As the feelings between them gradually grew gentler and deeper, the small house took on a different kind of warmth. Hai's walking practice had improved. Though his leg still hurt and each step required caution, he was no longer as hopeless as in the early days. Tieu San was always there, patient and tender, and Hai slowly learned to smile more, not forced smiles, but a rare sense of peace after months of turmoil. That afternoon passed very lightly. Tieu San was rearranging the potted plants on the porch, chatting as she worked, while Hai sat on a chair with his legs stretched out, sunlight scattering across the floor. She went inside to get some water, her steps slowing as she lightly held on to the edge of the table. "Are you okay?" Hai asked, sensing that something was wrong. Tieu San didn't have time to answer. She only felt everything in front of her suddenly go dark. The surrounding sound seemed to be pulled far away, buzzing faintly. She staggered a step, tried to call his name, but her throat tightened. Then her body collapsed, unable to hold on to anything. "Tieu San!" Hai's cry rang out in panic. He pushed against the chair, trying to stand up. Pain from his injured leg surged sharply, making him dizzy. But he didn't stop. He dragged himself toward her, knelt beside her, his trembling hands lifting Tieu San's pale face. "Hey, can you hear me?" There was no answer. Hai tried to lift her, but the pain made his leg buckle. They both fell, and he managed to turn his body so her head wouldn't hit the floor. His heart raced wildly. For the first time since the accident, he felt utterly helpless, not because of the pain, but because he couldn't protect the woman lying motionless in his arms. It's okay," he kept repeating, as if telling himself. With shaking hands, Hai searched for the phone that had fallen to the floor and called for an ambulance, his voice breaking with urgency. "Please, my girlfriend has fainted, she's not waking up. I can't lift her, my leg is injured." The voice on the other end calmly guided him step by step, but Hai felt his heart tightening with every word. He took off his jacket and gently covered Tieu San, resting her head on his thigh. One hand held hers tightly, the other continuously brushed her cheek, as if afraid she might disappear the moment he let go. "Please wake up, please." His voice cracked, hoarse. "I haven't even had the chance to take care of you yet." The ambulance siren wailed outside the gate, sharp and urgent. Hai exhaled shakily in desperate relief. When the medical staff entered the house, he instinctively stepped back, but his eyes never left Tieu San for even a second. They placed her on the stretcher and asked him a few brief questions. Hai answered haltingly, speaking while struggling to keep himself standing. Before the ambulance doors closed, he took Tieu San's hand once more. Her hand was colder than usual. "I'm here," he whispered, leaning close. "Don't be afraid." The ambulance doors shut. Hai stood alone in the small yard, gasping for breath, cold sweat running down his spine. His leg throbbed with pain, but he didn't care. In his mind, there was only one thought: this time, no matter how hard it was, he would follow her to the very end. And in that moment, he understood, love is not only about the peaceful times, holding hands and walking slowly together, but also about the moments when both fall down, still struggling to hold on to each other so that no one is left behind. In the hospital corridor, time moved so slowly it felt suffocating. Hai sat on a plastic chair pressed against the wall, his back leaning against the cold glass. His leg throbbed with a dull pain, but he could barely feel it anymore. Every sense he had was focused on the closed examination room door in front of him. Tieu San was inside, motionless, her pale face replaying in his mind over and over again. When the doctor stepped out, Hai almost jumped to his feet on instinct. He braced himself on the chair, struggling to keep his balance, his face tense, his breathing quick and shallow. "How is she, doctor?" His voice was hoarse, tangled with fear and a fragile thread of hope. The doctor looked at him, her expression softening, then offered a gentle smile. "Don't worry too much. She's fine." Just those 4 short words were enough to make Hai feel his heart plunge, then slowly settle back into place. Still, he didn't dare relax yet. The cause was physical exhaustion and a sudden drop in blood pressure, the doctor continued, then paused for a moment, as if to be sure he was listening. "And, she's pregnant." Hai froze. The words echoed in his mind, so clear that all the surrounding sounds seemed to fade away. He stood there, unable to speak, eyes wide, as if he hadn't yet grasped the full meaning of what he'd just heard. "Doctor, you mean?" His voice trembled. "A little over 6 weeks," the doctor nodded. "The pregnancy is still early. She's been under a lot of stress lately, exhausted, and taking constant care of you, so her body couldn't cope." Hai lowered his head deeply. A surge of emotion rose in his chest, shock, overwhelm, and a warmth so intense his eyes stung. He didn't know whether he should laugh or cry. He only knew that, in that moment, all the pain in his leg, all the shame and helplessness he'd felt before, suddenly seemed small and insignificant. When he was allowed into the room, Hai stepped in slowly. Tieu San lay on the hospital bed, her face already showing more color. Her eyelashes fluttered slightly when she heard his familiar footsteps. She opened her eyes, still tired, but instinctively searched for him. "Hi." Her voice was very soft. He came to her side and sat down, his hands trembling as he took hers. Her hand was warmer than before, and with that warmth, his own heartbeat finally began to calm. "How do you feel?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady, though his eyes betrayed his emotions. "I'm just a little tired," Tieu San smiled faintly, then seemed to remember something. "I scared you, didn't I?" Hai shook his head, his throat tightening. He lifted his hand and gently brushed her hair, the movement slow and reverent, as if touching something fragile. "The doctor told me," he said, his voice low but full of warmth. "You're tired because there's someone else now." Tieu San froze. Her eyes widened, and her hand instinctively moved to her stomach. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then tears spilled over, not violently, just quietly soaking into the pillow. "Really?" she whispered, stunned and trembling. Hai nodded, the corner of his lips lifting into a smile he hadn't worn in a very long time, a complete, unbroken smile. He leaned down and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead. "Yes," he said. "I'm here. We're having a baby." Tieu San began to cry, but this time they were tears of emotion. Hai said nothing more. He simply held her hand tightly, his gaze full of tenderness, as if carving that image deep into his heart, the woman he loved, carrying within her a tiny new life, the result of all the pain, perseverance, and love they had endured together. In the quiet hospital room, amid the scent of antiseptic and the pale white lights, something was silently taking root. Not loud, not showy, just real, and warm. And Hai knew that from that moment on, he didn't just have a reason to stand up and move forward, he had an entire future waiting for him ahead. That afternoon, after Tieu San had stabilized and the doctor allowed her to go home and rest, Hai supported her as she slowly descended the familiar steps. The way home seemed shorter, not because the distance had changed, but because both of their hearts now carried something new, something warm. Hai walked more slowly than usual. One hand held his crutch, the other rested lightly against Tieu San's back, as if afraid that even a moment of carelessness might cause her to grow tired and fall again. Tieu San noticed and smiled softly, her hand instinctively resting on her stomach, a small gesture that made Hai's heart soften instantly. When the front door opened, Hai's mother was in the kitchen. Hearing footsteps, she turned around, worry flickering across her face when she saw how pale Tieu San still looked. "How are you?" she asked quickly, stepping closer. "I heard you fainted," Mother was so worried. Before Tieu San could answer, Hai spoke. His voice was low, but the emotion in it was unmistakable. Mom. Tieu San is okay now. He paused for a beat, as if gathering courage. The doctor said. Tieu San is pregnant. The kitchen fell silent. Hai's mother froze for a moment. She looked at Tieu San, then at Hai, as if making sure she'd heard correctly. Then her eyes reddened almost instantly. She stepped forward without another word and wrapped Tieu San in a tight embrace. Oh my God, her voice trembled. So it's true, it's really true. Tieu San was taken by surprise, but the warmth of her embrace was so comforting that she couldn't hold back her tears. She lowered her head slightly, her voice choked. I'm sorry for making you worry. Hai's mother quickly shook her head, gently rubbing Tieu San's back, her touch tender, like she was holding her own daughter. There's nothing to apologize for, she said, her voice both joyful and trembling. You've suffered enough already. From now on, you have to think more about yourself, and about the baby too. She pulled back slightly and wiped Tieu San's tears, her eyes filled with love. I'm here. And Hai is here too. You don't have to carry everything on your own anymore. Hai stood beside them, quietly watching the two most important women in his life embrace. A strange feeling welled up inside him, gratitude, emotion, and a deep sense of responsibility. He stepped closer, placed one hand on his mother's shoulder, then gently laid his other hand over Tieu San's. Don't worry, Mom, he said slowly but firmly. I'll take care of her. And of the little one too. Hai's mother looked at him and nodded, her smile still wet with tears but radiant. That's all I need to hear to be at peace. That evening, the small house felt brighter than usual. Not because of more lights, but because of more joy. Tieu San sat leaning back in her chair as Hai's mother cooked her a warm bowl of porridge, constantly reminding her to eat slowly and rest. Hai sat across from them, watching the two of them with an unusually gentle gaze. Outside, dusk settled softly. One day came to a close, but at the same time, another journey had just begun, the journey of a family slowly taking shape, built from love, protection, and arms that would no longer let go. From the day they learned that Tieu San was pregnant, Hai's mother's small house seemed to change. The space itself was the same, the old table and chairs still stood in their familiar place, the kitchen still carried the comforting scent of cooking smoke, but the rhythm of life slowed down, and grew much warmer. The next morning, before Tieu San was fully awake, she heard soft clattering sounds from the kitchen. The aroma of freshly cooked rice porridge mixed with a hint of ginger drifted through the house. She sat up, still a little dizzy, about to get out of bed when the bedroom door opened. Why are you up so early? Hai's mother said, her voice both gentle and firm. Lie down and rest a bit more. I've already made porridge. Tieu San paused, feeling shy. I'm used to waking up early. Let me help you. No helping at all. Hai's mother cut her off, though her eyes held no harshness. You're not only taking care of yourself anymore. She placed the still hot bowl of porridge on the small table beside the bed, blew on it lightly to cool it down, then pushed it toward Tieu San. The gesture made Tieu San's throat tighten. It had been a very long time since she'd felt someone care for her in such small, attentive ways. Hai leaned against the doorway on his crutch, watching the scene, his heart softening. Before he could say anything, his mother turned to him. What are you sitting there for? Go get a glass of warm water for Tieu San. Hai answered with a quiet yes and hurried to do as told. For the first time in his life, he realized he was no longer the center of concern, and he didn't feel hurt by it at all. He only felt relieved. In the days that followed, Hai's mother practically watched over Tieu San's every meal and every hour of rest. She wouldn't let her carry water, wouldn't let her bend too much, and even insisted she walk slowly. Once, Tieu San quietly went out to water a few potted plants in the yard. She hadn't been there 5 minutes before Hai's mother noticed. What are you doing? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough to make Tieu San startle. I was just watering them a bit. Hai's mother walked over and gently took the watering can from her hands. The plants can wait. You getting tired is not okay. She went back inside and returned shortly after with a loose, light brown shirt, old, but neatly washed and pressed. When I was pregnant with Hai, I wore this, she said, handing it to Tieu San. It's not pretty, but it's comfortable. Tieu San took the shirt, her hands trembling. She bowed her head deeply, tears falling onto the worn fabric. Thank you, Mom. Hai's mother said nothing more. She simply placed a hand on Tieu San's shoulder and gave a gentle squeeze, slow and steady, like a silent affirmation. From now on, you are family. One evening, the whole family gathered around the dinner table. There were no elaborate dishes, vegetable soup, braised fish, the familiar bowl of pickled eggplant, but the meal was filled with rare, precious laughter. Tieu San ate slowly while Hai's mother kept placing more food in her bowl, and Hai sat across from them, occasionally looking up at the two women, his gaze growing thoughtful. After dinner, Hai's mother stood up to tidy things away, then suddenly stopped and sat down facing the two of them. She was quiet for a long moment, as if carefully considering her words. I'm not good at long speeches, she began, her voice lowering. But there's something I want to make clear. Tieu San and Hai both looked up. I don't need grand formalities, and I don't need anything showy. She turned to Tieu San, her eyes softening. All I need is for you to be safe. For you to be healthy, and for the baby to be healthy, that's enough. Hai reached for Tieu San's hand. Her hand was a little cold, but very real. He took a deep breath and then spoke, slowly, firmly. Mom, when my leg gets a bit better. He glanced at Tieu San, his eyes steady. I want to marry her. Tieu San froze. She turned to look at him, her eyes wide, so stunned she forgot to breathe. Hai squeezed her hand gently, his voice low but clear. Not because there's a baby. But because she makes me want to stand up every day. The room fell silent. Then Hai's mother nodded, very slowly. She didn't smile broadly, nor did she cry. She simply said one simple sentence. That's good. I'll wait. That night, Tieu San lay on her side, one hand resting on her belly, the other holding Hai's hand. Outside, the wind whispered softly. The old house, worn but peaceful, seemed to shelter something that was quietly growing. There were no loud promises. No distant plans. Just a family slowly taking shape, beginning with love, with patience, and with days spent waiting together.
Xin chào mọi người, cảm ơn mọi người đã xem hết video ngày hôm nay của mình. Chúc mọi người có một ngày mới vui vẻ, hạnh phúc và một ngày làm việc tràn đầy năng lượng. Hy vọng rằng mọi người vẫn sẽ yêu thích những câu chuyện mình chia sẻ và ủng hộ kênh cho mình để mình có động lực ra nhiều video hơn. Hiện tại thì những video của mình đang được phát hành vào khung giờ 7 giờ tối và 7 giờ sáng tại Việt Nam. Thì nếu mọi người yêu thích thì nhớ bấm nút theo dõi, bật chuông thông báo để nhận thông báo khi mình đăng video mới nhất nha. Và để lại cho mình nhận xét ở dưới phần bình luận để mình có động lực làm nhiều video hơn, cũng như cải thiện những video sau hay và hấp dẫn hơn để cho mọi người cùng xem. Cảm ơn mọi người đã lắng nghe một phút chia sẻ của mình. Hy vọng sẽ vẫn được đồng hành cùng mọi người và được mọi người ủng hộ trong thời gian sắp tới. Hẹn gặp lại mọi người trong video tiếp theo nha.